channel, I sometimes get asked, who is my favourite director? And the honest answer is, I don't actually have a favourite director. There is no one director where I like all of their stuff. However, there are a few directors, particularly kind of B-movie directors, whom, when they produce a new project, I'm quite excited to watch. One of these is Perry Reginald Teo, whose previous kind of horror movies I quite enjoyed, and has a kind of a James Wan low budget kind of quality to it. I've enjoyed his kind of horror films in the past. His action film, not so much, but you know, the batting average is still pretty good. And here he is, Perry Reginald Teo directs, written and edited this movie, Shadow Master. Now this one stars D.Y. Sal as a character called Aaran, and this movie is clearly influenced by The Crow. Now, this is an interesting movie, because I was kind of quite excited to watch it, having been a fan of Perry Reginald Teo, as I say, for a while now. And this is kind of an action horror movie, like I've said, kind of taking inspiration from The Crow. They're kind of similar stories, so to speak. What is the kind of the premise here? Well, it focuses on this character called Aaran, who is a kind of an ex-criminal who is kind of wants to get out of life, and he's kind of got out on his own and ends up taking a job in this dilapidated building as a kind of a night watchman. And you know, it's kind of filled with all these kind of weird kind of people, and there seems to be some type of forces at work here, dark forces at work, who are kidnapping and doing weird things with their children. And ultimately he kind of becomes their protector, and in doing so he ultimately has to kind of make a deal with this death god that gives him kind of powers, but at the same time kind of chips away at his soul kind of every time he uses them. What'll happen? Well, you'll have to watch the movie to find out. Okay, will you like this movie? Okay, this is going to depend if you think this is cool. Now, do you watch this and think, this is badass? Because if the answer is yes, then you may like this movie. Because this is a kind of like gothic, weird, kind of like emo goth movie. And if you think, that's cool, yeah, it is kind of, if you look at Perry Reginald Teo and his kind of like civvies, you can kind of see the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree with this movie. So, what can I say that works for this movie? I'm going to come back to that. Okay, there are some things I will say that I legitimately think is good. Now, one of the reasons I like Perry Reginald Teo as a director is I think he has quite a distinctive style. It doesn't always work, to be honest, but I feel he kind of has this, like I say, a low budget kind of James Wan feel to him, and just the way his kind of shots are comprised, and you know, they're kind of like, they have a certain kind of stylistic quality to them, and it's true of this movie. I mean, this feels like a kind of a hyper reality, not quite kind of a realistic kind of portrayal. Everything is kind of, like I say, like cyber goth kind of style, but it kind of gives it a distinctive look. And you know, it's all kind of, the colours are kind of muted down. Everything is kind of like dark and shadowy and dilapidated, and I kind of quite enjoy the aesthetics of many of his films. This works, I think, best in a true horror film I've quite enjoyed of his in the past. When he kind of veers into other genres, I think it works a little less. And this one, it's kind of a hybrid horror action movie, so it kind of somewhat works, but sometimes doesn't at the same time. But nonetheless, I appreciate the kind of the visual style. It's interesting when you see certainly a low budget filmmaker who is restricted with obviously lack of funds, who still manages to carve out, I think, a distinct style. And there are a couple of directors, Perry Reginald Teo being one of them, I think does do this. So I quite like this. Now, this is, I suppose, first and foremost, a martial arts film. Our main character, and the actor that plays him is clearly a proficient martial artist, and there are some scenes here that I think are very, very well choreographed. There's some great athletic ability on display here, and I feel there's a good variety in regards to kind of like fight scenes and different kind of like impressive moves and things like that that I think you know, are quite impressive to look at in a kind of a vacuum, so to speak. What do I say in a vacuum? I'll come on to that again in a minute. So yeah, it's kind of like a pretty good fight scenes peppered through the movie. You know, that are coming out relatively kind of regularly, so you won't get kind of bored if you're just going to want to watch fight scenes. Well, I don't think you'll get bored. Maybe you will, because this movie, unfortunately, is suffering massively in the narrative department, which I feel this movie is its biggest kind of letdown. I mean, aesthetically, I think this movie, you know, has some strong elements here. There's certainly some choices in regards to the costuming that kind of, as I say, would appeal to this kind of like cyberpunk, you know, steampunk, kind of cyber goth kind of aesthetic. So, you know, if you think, well, that's kind of brilliant, then, you know, this grumpy old man feels a little bit too old for it, potentially. But, you know, it's there and that kind of, it's stylistic, and I appreciate the choices, albeit I think it looks a bit silly. But this is a visual style, but what is lacking is the narrative here. And you know, we start off in our movie, and we really have no context. We don't know the world that this is meant to be taking place in. We know next to nothing about the character of we don't bother with anything like characterization or anything like that. We'll just kind of, you know, he'll just waltz into this kind of weird, kind of dilapidated building that I thought was a hospital first of all, but is it some type of slum or, you know, type of kind of, you know, housing building? I just don't know. The movie is just not bothered with setting up any type of world building here. And why is everyone dressed up like Harley Quinn? You know, it's kind of very much style over substance. As we go through, we get a little bit of kind of backstory in regards to the character of Aaran, but I don't feel we ever know his character. We learn through flashbacks, yes, he used to be part of a gang and had a kind of a violent past, but I never felt like I knew this character's personality. It was nothing. There was nothing there. It was just an empty void of this is down to kind of like, quite honestly, poor writing. And the actor itself is a great martial artist, but I really wasn't getting much kind of charisma. And why, oh why, is he wearing a stupid wig? It was so distracting. Just have the guy have short hair, or, you know, or grow his hair. You know, it just looks ridiculous, this wig. Anyway, and then we kind of get into the kind of like these kind of denizens. Why are they there? And what is this world? Is it a post-apocalyptic world or something like that? It just doesn't make any kind of like narrative sense. So the knock-on effect of that is you feel disconnected from the story. So we have these kind of like this kind of visually kind of interesting world, but there's no backstory or no meat on the bone. It's just surface decorations ultimately. And then we kind of, as you go through the movie, you know, it relies so heavily on the kind of the aesthetic. You know, we have our bad guys who seem to be living in another part of the hospital, all who dress up like Power Rangers villains. And I'm thinking, who are these guys? I mean, are they meant to be supernatural? Or, you know, are they just hanging around in this kind of like garb all the time? Oh, it's Mephisto. What? I mean, it's ridiculous, unfortunately. This movie, I'm sad to say, it's so much a case of style over substance, and it's just not engaging. The story isn't engaging, the characters are not engaging. It relies too heavily on having kooky visuals, which I think look fine, you know, if you are going to the Goth, you know, nightclub and stuff like that, but when you're trying to watch a story, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work, and it ends up becoming silly because you have all these characters in these extravagant kind of costumes or dilapidated old buildings. You know, why are people just with no backstory, with no character arcs, with no kind of like world building? It just feels completely hollow. And then when you kind of look at these fight scenes, they're impressive to look at, but because we don't care about the characters, because we don't feel like we know these characters, we simply don't care, and it becomes boring. It's weird because the fight scenes, like I said, in the vacuum, they're very impressive. And if you're just looking at a clip of this, oh cool, it's a cool fight scene. But you watch it in a, you know, an hour and a half narrative where you're not connecting with the story, it becomes dull. And because I was kind of not connecting with the characters, the visual flourishes, which I think maybe some people will enjoy, but they just seem silly. It just looks ridiculous at times. Maybe it'll be a big hit on the cybergoth scene, if that even still exists. I don't even know. For me, it's a really kind of disappointing movie. Flourishes visually. I'll give it a 4 out of 10 because of that. There are visual flourishes here, and clearly there's some very talented martial arts on display. It just needs to be in a better film. I'm hoping Perry Reginald Teo, he has got a few films in pre-production, including a Tekken film. I hope he kind of develops the narrative a bit better here. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.